Imagine every F-35 and every Boeing 787 suddenly can't be finished. Not because of bombs, but because one metal stops arriving. No titanium, no planes, factories sit silent, pilots can't fly, and a trillion-dollar aircraft program grinds to a halt. Sounds extreme? It's not. China controls about 35% of the world's titanium. The F-35 program is valued at roughly $1.7 trillion, and large portions of those jets and modern airliners are built with titanium. Take the F-35. Roughly 40% of key airframe and engine components rely on it. Without a steady flow of titanium, production stops. Period. Think of titanium like the skeleton of modern aircraft. Lighter than steel, stronger than aluminum. Remove the skeleton and the body can't stand. That's why this isn't a supply problem. It's a national security problem. Over the next few minutes, we'll unpack how we got here, who controls the metal, and what happens if that flow is cut off. First, let's make sure everyone understands exactly what titanium is and why nothing else really replaces it. So what exactly makes titanium so special? Why can't we just swap it out for steel or aluminum? The answer comes down to three key qualities. It's stronger than steel, lighter than aluminum, and resistant to corrosion. That's a rare combination. Imagine building a skyscraper out of wood. Strong in some ways, but weak in others. Titanium is like having steel's muscle with aluminum's lightness, plus the durability to survive extreme conditions without rusting away. This is why titanium shows up everywhere reliability is life or death. Fighter jet frames, landing gear, submarine hulls, even medical implants inside your body. If you want something to last under pressure, you want titanium in the mix. Take the F-35 Lightning II. About 40% of its airframe and engine are titanium. That means nearly half of the jet's skeleton and heart are built from this one metal. Or the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Tons of titanium go into the landing gear, the engine housings, and critical safety systems. Without titanium, both military and commercial aviation literally cannot get off the ground. If steel and aluminum are the bricks and concrete of industry, titanium is like the rebar, the hidden structure holding the most advanced technology together. Okay, so titanium is the backbone. But here's the bigger question. Who controls the world's supply of it? Because that's where things get dangerous. Now that we know why titanium is essential, let's talk about who actually produces it and why that matters. The United States produces less than 5% of the world's titanium. That means 95% of the titanium we need comes from other countries. In fact, 85% of American titanium is imported. Here's the breakdown. China produces roughly 210,000 tons per year, about 35% of global output. Russia and Kazakhstan together add another 30%. That means three countries control nearly 2/3 of the world's titanium. And right now the US is hooked on that supply. Why does this create such a dangerous dependency? Because titanium isn't just a raw metal. It's processed into aerospace-grade parts, which take specialized plants and technology. Even if the US wanted to produce more tomorrow, it couldn't scale quickly. The Mountain Pass deposit in California exists, but the processing infrastructure just isn't there yet. The TET plant in Nevada, once a strategic asset, has been idle since 2020. Building new processing capacity would take years. Think of it like depending on one water tower for your whole city. If that tower shuts off, taps run dry instantly. That's the US and titanium today. And here's the kicker. The country with the most control over that water tower isn't just sitting still. It's playing a long game. That's China's advantage, and it's already shown it knows how to use this leverage. This isn't an accident. China didn't just happen to control 35% of global titanium. It built that dominance deliberately, and it has a history of using critical materials as leverage. Back in 2010, China restricted rare earth exports to pressure the West. Now titanium could be next. China's Biota Group, the world's largest titanium producer, manufactures aerospace-grade sponge titanium, the type that Boeing and the Pentagon depend on. Since 2018, China doubled its output from 37% to 66% of global capacity. Beyond its own borders, through initiatives like Belt and Road, it secured access to overseas mines. For example, the Moma mine in Mozambique exports 90% of its output directly to China. This isn't just production. It's supply chain control, giving China enormous leverage over anyone who relies on this metal. Why does this matter? Because China can tighten exports at any time, disrupting production lines, delaying military programs, or forcing the West to negotiate on Beijing's terms. While the US relies on foreign titanium, China has quietly built the kind of control that can decide who flies, who manufactures, and who falls behind in global tech. Think of it like chess. China is a grandmaster moving pieces several turns ahead while the US is still figuring out how to protect its pawns. So far, this sounds strategic, but the consequences aren't just hypothetical. Real companies and real defense programs have already felt the pressure. The risk isn't theoretical, it's already hitting home. Boeing, for example, faced a major scandal in 2024 when it bought counterfeit titanium because it couldn't get enough from China. That's not just a paperwork problem. Using low-quality titanium could compromise the safety of planes and jets, and even partial export restrictions could paralyze production for years. It's not just new aircraft either. Spare parts, maintenance, and upgrades all rely on a steady flow of titanium. Ground one supply line, and fleets can't fly. Factories can't operate. Millions of dollars in contracts and billions in potential revenue hang in the balance. The Air Force could lose its edge. NATO's strength could be affected. And commercial aviation? Imagine thousands of flights grounded because parts can't be made. Think of it like a single fuse in a massive electrical system. Cut it and the lights go out, not just in one building, but across the whole city. That's how fragile these supply chains have become. And while China builds this advantage, domestic and allied policies have made the US even more vulnerable, creating a perfect storm that we can't ignore. The US didn't get into this mess overnight. A combination of policy choices, trade decisions, and underinvestment created a vulnerability that China can exploit. Take domestic production. The TT plant in Nevada, once a strategic titanium processing facility, has been idle since 2020. Instead of maintaining and expanding these assets, the US allowed its own capacity to shrink. Then there's the trade angle. Tariffs on allies like Japan, one of the few countries with significant titanium production capacity, make it harder to rely on them for help. Meanwhile, sanctions against Russian titanium, intended to punish Moscow, ended up deepening US dependence on China. It's a classic case of unintended consequences. Policies meant to protect national interests ended up increasing vulnerability. Combine this with reliance on imports for 85% of American titanium needs and a slow domestic industrial base, and the result is clear. The US is caught between a rock and a hard place. Strategic decisions made at home and abroad created a hole that China is now perfectly positioned to exploit. So if we're this exposed, what can the US realistically do? Are there ways to fix the problem before it spirals into a full-blown crisis? Faced with this vulnerability, Washington and industry have a few options, but none are simple. In the short term, the US can try to patch the problem. That means tapping Pentagon reserves, working with allies like Japan, Australia, and Canada, and improving oversight of current suppliers to prevent counterfeit or low-quality titanium from entering the supply chain. These steps might buy time, but they won't fully solve the problem. Long-term solutions are tougher. The US would need to rebuild domestic processing capacity, reopening idle plants like TT, investing in Mountain Pass, and creating modern facilities to produce aerospace-grade titanium at scale. Recycling old titanium is possible, but it's expensive and not yet efficient enough to meet demand. Diversifying supply chains globally could help, but it takes years to develop mines, transport infrastructure, and refining capacity. Every option comes with huge costs and long timelines. It's like trying to rebuild a highway system after it's been neglected for decades. You can patch potholes in the short term, but building new lanes and bridges takes time, money, and careful planning. And traffic can't wait. So what happens if these solutions are delayed or fail? The consequences could ripple across industry, defense, and even national security. If nothing changes, the US faces three possible scenarios. In the best case, a coordinated effort with allies, smart use of reserves, and ramped-up domestic production keeps delays manageable. The supply crunch hurts, but programs continue. In the middle case, partial solutions, slow production, costs skyrocket, and aircraft and ships are delayed by years. In the worst case, China tightens exports fully. Fleets are grounded, billions are lost, and the US loses critical technological and military advantages. This isn't just abstract economics. It's national security. Fighter jets, submarines, and even medical equipment depend on titanium. A disruption touches the Air Force, Boeing, NATO, and every sector that relies on advanced technology. Titanium might be a small metal, but its impact is enormous, like a keystone in an arch. Remove it, and the entire structure collapses. This is a wake-up call. The U.S. must act to secure supply chains, rebuild domestic capacity, and diversify sources, or risk letting a single material dictate the fate of national defense and industry. Stay informed, follow the story, and understand the stakes. Because the decisions made today will determine whether the next generation of aircraft, technology, and military strength can take off. Subscribe to the channel to follow this story as it unfolds, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.